Okay, Anton Karas, the third man. I'm Randy Credico live on the fly here today with an unscheduled but very important Assange Countdown to Freedom episode that we just decided to do today because of the bombshell story in Yahoo News about the CIA's plan to either kidnap or assassinate Julian Assange. We interviewed Dr. Nils Melzer, Professor Nils Melzer, the Special Rapporteur on Torture at the UN, on Saturday. And the next day, the story came out. And we were kind of going to actually do that interview with Mr. Melzer on Sunday and wait for that article to come out, but we didn't. And that's the one that aired today on Progressive Radio Network, the one with Stefano Marizzi. So we're going to get right into it. Nils Melzer, Professor Melzer, what do you prefer to be called, if I may ask? Dr. Melzer?
Absolutely, that's fine.
Okay. Dr. Melzer, thank you very much. As you know, we knew this was coming out yesterday, but we didn't know what the gist of the story was. And you finally, I know, have read it. It's a long piece. They could put War and Peace jacket around it. Give us your initial response to this. Let's talk about the response by other organizations and then your own personal response, or in any order.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me on the show again. I can't really speak for other organizations. Clearly, I think what is very positive is that we see that the story has been picked up by big news organizations. Yahoo News, obviously, having published it. CNN has also picked up the story, and rightly so, because it is an extremely important story. Now, to me, this has not come as a surprise. As you know, I've been investigating this case for more than 2 years, and I've written a book about it. I have intervened several times officially with states because I have come to the conclusion that there has been extensive collusion between intelligence services of various democratic states, including the United States, the United Kingdom, Sweden, and Ecuador, in order to not prosecute Assange, but actually persecute him. So, and when I say that it is about persecution and a prosecution, I mean that prosecution is here formally being used, but for ulterior motives, not in order to enforce the law, but for political purposes, and therefore it is actually a persecution. And so what these revelations really confirm are the findings that I've already voiced several times, that this case is not about Assange having committed any crimes and having to face justice, but that this is really a political persecution case where intelligence services are pursuing illegitimate interests of secrecy, of impunity, and that's what they feel is threatened. And the revelations of WikiLeaks that Assange obviously has sponsored in 2010 and afterwards, starting in 2010 with these huge revelations on Afghanistan and on the Iraq wars, then the diplomatic cables, then the Vault 7 revelations on the hacking activities of the CIA in 2017, which seems to have triggered those plans to either kidnap or assassinate Assange. This is not because Assange has committed any crime. This is investigative journalism. So clearly what the states are trying to do here is to suppress the methodology of WikiLeaks, to pursue a person because he has embarrassed the CIA, the United States, because they fear that this approach will serve as an example to others, that others may also launch leaking platforms and follow the example of Julian Assange. And so therefore, he had to be destroyed at all costs. And what we see in this article is really that this is not, a state trying to prosecute someone by using, regular legislation and the procedures that any society governed by the rule of law provides for these purposes, but they're actually trying to neutralize what they perceive to a threat to their essential interests through illegal means like kidnapping, rendition, assassination. So that clearly is what we see here. And what we have received now is confirmation that that indeed is a case of political persecution and nothing else.
Oh, well, listen, you told me yesterday, there's nothing here that surprised you when you heard about the story and you read the gist of the story and that was out there. There was nothing in there. Now we're going back to 2017. You mentioned Vault 7. Vault 7 seems to be the flashpoint here that really, angered, infuriated not just Pompeo, but many members of the CIA. And so that's when they began to retaliate. Had you already figured that out? I think people figured out that that was what triggered the stepping up of the spying and the designation as a hostile state intelligence agency. Your thoughts?
Well, yes, I mean, there have been several factors that may have contributed to this. Earlier, during the evidential hearings in London, in the extradition trial of Assange, there were other factors that were also voiced. For example, that President Trump apparently, through his representative Rohrabacher, offered during Assange a deal. If Assange disclosed his sources for the DNC leaks, that then President Trump would consider to pardon him, basically, and allow him to leave the embassy without any threat of prosecution. A deal which, according to his lawyer, Jennifer Robinson, who was present at the meeting, she served as a witness in that hearing. So she confirmed that that deal was offered, and that was turned down by Assange. He refused to disclose his sources, as any investigative journalist, would refuse to do. And so it was initially thought that this might have angered President Trump, and then triggered those measures that ultimately led to his expulsion from the embassy. But it absolutely makes sense that we also see in the bigger picture that obviously 2017 that's the year when that deal was offered. In 2017 was also the year when Vault 7 was published, and therefore which exposed in the probably biggest data leak in the history of the CIA, exposed the CIA's hacking activities worldwide, and really deeply embarrassed the agency. Because it also proved that it was not capable of keeping its operations and methodology secret. And that was obviously perceived as a massive threat by the CIA. Now, I think it's very, very important, though, that we always underline here that what Julian Assange has done is not a crime. He has done what investigative journalists throughout the world and throughout the US do all the time. He has obtained, he has not hacked this information, he has obtained it and has then decided that to publish it because it was of public interest. So this is investigative journalism. This is what the First Amendment of the US Constitution protects. This is what the human right to freedom of expression protects. And so if the CIA doesn't like it, which I can understand, then they have to protect their data better, but it's not a crime for a journalist to publish this information, and certainly not when that information is of public interest and also points to misconduct of the state. Then it is actually a very important function of the fourth estate, the press, to do that.
Well, Vault 7, he's not being charged with Vault 7. He's being retaliated against for putting out Vault 7, which he legally his responsibility and his right to put it out as a journalist, that goes out there. It angers the CIA and Pompeo, who just got the gig as the CIA chief. And so now they're looking for another reason. They're going to rendition him. They don't know what to do if they rendition him because there were no charges filed against him. What do you think they would have done against him if they actually had gone through and gotten the okay to rendition him? What would they have done with him at that point?
Well, what we can see is that it seems that they were prepared to do just about anything to him. And what's really important is when you read this article carefully, we can see that, as you rightly point out, no charges were there. There was no indictment ready, to prosecute him, because obviously, which is understandable, because he had not committed a crime. The Obama administration, had investigated the matter for a long time and had come to the conclusion that it was impossible to indict him because of press freedom of the press protections. And so now what we see is that he has obtained this information that was of public interest about the CIA, the Vault 7 documents, and has disclosed them, has published them. And so now the CIA wants to take revenge, basically, for this, and to intimidate other journalists, because they don't want journalists to be interested in their business and to start publishing secret information of the CIA. So, but the methods, it's very important. They don't consider him having committed a crime, and now they want to prosecute him and to extradite him, which would be the methods, or the procedures to be used by a state governed by the rule of law. But they're basically planning to take revenge through kidnapping, rendition, and assassination. I mean, three options, all of which are absolutely clearly unlawful, if not criminal. And so if a state agency, as a first kind of measure of resort, plans for basically criminal activities in order to enforce its policies, and then asks the Justice Department to come up with some charges against Assange. So once they have renditioned him and kidnapped him and brought him over to the US, they can charge him with something. Basically, it proves that this is not about the law, but that the law is, as I indicated in the beginning, is instrumentalized for ulterior purposes. And that really is something that you will see in authoritarian states, in dictatorships. That's what dictatorships do.
So they figure out they want to get even with them. Now they got to come up with a reason to get even with them.
Exactly.
Through legal means. And so they drum up some kind of, they concoct some kind of, espionage act charge against a foreigner who never committed espionage. But so that's when it steps up. They start planning the prosecution, because if they're going to do this, if they're going to grab him, they got to have this is what's pointed out in Yahoo News, but I know you've already known about this. I'll get back to that in a second. Before I forget, you interviewed him back in April of, I think was it April of 2019? I think he was well aware that there were assassination plans on him, and that had to weigh heavy on his psyche. Would you agree with that?
Oh, sure. I mean, there have been death threats since 2010, especially emanating from the United States. Various politicians, public figures who suggested that he should be assassinated, that he should be droned. I mean, even Hillary Clinton is alleged to have asked, can't we just drone this guy? She then, later denied that, but. It just shows that the general atmosphere and the general perception was that this man should be assassinated and should be killed. But I think that is really very worrying. When a state that has all the legal procedures at its disposal considers, doesn't consider that really, but really considers means and methods that are clearly, more typical for a criminal organization than for a democratic state.
All right. Well, look. We have this spying revelations. We have the stuff that you pointed out in your book, the trial of Julian Assange. You pointed out thoroughly about the FOIA stuff that Stefania was talking about the other day, how they kept this thing artificially alive. And I'm not saying charges, the phony investigation to keep him in this jam, in this nowhere, the Bermuda Triangle-like land. So this is happening to Julian Assange at this time. What will this do? They didn't seem to have any effect on the prosecution or the hearing here in London, the extradition hearing at all. Will this, in your estimation, have any impact on what happens on October 27th and 28th?
Well, I hope it will. I mean, it's about time for the U.S. authorities to recognize that they don't really have any respectable case against Julian Assange, and that they should drop the case. Now, if we look at the history of this, unfortunately, I'm not very optimistic, and that's just because whether you go back to the Swedish allegations that were artificially maintained by the Swedish authorities and were taken also, obviously, by the US and by the UK as a welcome excuse to kind of corner Julian Assange in that embassy. And then they were as soon as Julian Assange was arrested in April 2019, and he was actually at the disposal of the Swedish authorities, they decided basically to drop the case because they didn't have any evidence, and they didn't have any evidence from the beginning. They had from the beginning instrumentalized this proceeding for different purposes and had basically misled the public that this was about, rape and sexual abuse, but it wasn't. It was about persecuting him. You can see that this is just another puzzle piece, fitting directly into the overall picture of states colluding together in a kind of concerted effort to persecute and corner and demonize a man who they perceive as a threat, not because of anything criminal that he has done, because of the crimes that they have committed and that he has exposed. And so that is the issue here, that we see people who have committed serious crimes, who are state representatives, and we're talking about torture, we're talking about murder, we're talking about illegal aggression of states, we're talking about grave corruption. All of this is being exposed by WikiLeaks. And now the culprits don't like that, obviously, and they use and abuse the legal system to portray Assange as the scapegoat, as the problem, and they identify all kinds of accusations. He's a spy, he's a traitor, he's a rapist. But every single time when they're supposed to actually bring the evidence for it, they change the narrative. How many times has the indictment changed? I mean, it took them 10 years to come up with an indictment, and then they come up with an indictment in 2018, and then they changed it in 2019. And they changed it again in 2020, and they move the goalposts all the time. Every single time when they're supposed to actually bring the evidence, they start moving the goalposts and manipulating the procedures and the evidence. And so that is really the pattern we see, and that's a typical pattern of show trials, where you're basically abusing the legal system for purposes of persecution. And I think that the big value of this revelation now is that it is a big, huge puzzle piece that confirms all of those suspicions that we've had so far, and fits neatly into the picture of persecution and contradicts any narrative of good faith prosecution by those states. It clearly proves that this is a bad faith proceeding against Assange, that this is not about the law. It is about intimidating journalism. It's about suppressing press freedom. It's about protecting impunity for state officials. And that really is something we have to fight against. I mean, when I say we, I say everybody. The United Nations, human rights organizations, media organizations, the mainstream media. I'm very grateful they have taken this up because now it has really become impossible to ignore. And I would encourage, journalists from all media outlets to look deeply into this case, assemble all the evidence, and expose this misconduct, because the public deserves to know the truth.
Well, I think maybe they're more likely at this point to come out. I want to ask you, what was the motivation of these, in your estimation? I know what they say, of the 30 CIA either lawyers or ex-agents who actually were sources for this and confirmed everything that Yahoo News presented in their story yesterday.
Well, I can't really speak about individual motivations of other people, but I think I'm very grateful that some of the officials have shown the integrity to basically inform the media and through this the public about the misconduct of the authorities that they were working for, and that's not betraying the trust of those authorities, because that's the duty of any official in any democratic country. When you see that your authorities are engaging in illegal activities, and I mean assassinations and kidnapping and rendition clearly are crimes, then this deserves to be exposed. Any country may have security concerns that are legitimate. They may have a intelligence service that serves them with integrity, but these types of services do not assassinate. They don't kidnap. They don't engage in illegal activities, and so I think that's extremely important.
Well, so what isn't the Biden administration's position at this point untenable? The fact that you go back, Obama and Biden was the vice president, said there's no way we can do this. And then Trump decides to do it based on the fact that they're embarrassed, not because they committed a crime, because they are embarrassed. All right. So they put it out there. The judge says, all right, we're not sending him back. All right. That's the ruling. But the Biden administration, that was once part of the Obama administration, decides to appeal it. At this point, don't you think they have an exit? They got a reason to exit because the position now is so untenable.
Well, I think if the Biden administration wants to distinguish itself from the Trump administration, the only option they have is to drop this case. If they maintain this case, if they continue to maintain, I can understand to some extent that the decision to appeal this case was still taken by the previous administration, and that some of the officials of the previous administration were still serving and were responsible for this case and following instructions that were from the previous administration in January, February this year. So the decision to appeal was basically still taken by the previous administration. And I understand that the incoming administration had other business to do than start correcting all kinds of procedural decisions in individual cases like this. So I can understand to some extent that this procedure has been, drawn out and maintained initially by the Biden administration. But now, with these revelations, and these are not the only ones, let me just remind you of the revelations just a few weeks ago about this important witness of the prosecution, who's called Teenager in the indictment of 2020, an Icelandic witness who came out saying that he had been basically committing perjury and providing false evidence upon encouragement of the FBI in return for a non-prosecution agreement for himself. But he admitted that the evidence he had given against Assange was false. So we have that, which clearly shows that the whole indictment, the second superseding indictment of 2020, is based on facts that have been invented in a large part by an important witness. And that really shines a light on the methods that the authorities under the Trump administrations were prepared to use to persecute Assange. And so this really needs to be investigated, because probably or it is at least reasonable to assume that if one of those witnesses was encouraged to provide false evidence and then came out publicly with it, that there may be other witnesses that were put under pressure as well. And now we see that, the methods that the CIA considered under the Trump administration were blatantly unlawful. I mean, from assassination and kidnapping and rendition. So all of this shows that this case has been prosecuted, has been based on, manipulated evidence, has been prosecuted, through methods and options were considered that were clearly crimes. This whole case really, also from a legal perspective, doesn't have a valid basis. You can't extradite someone, for espionage, which is the quintessential political crime, when you have an extradition treaty between the US and the UK that prohibits extraditions for political offenses. You can't extradite someone because what he has done is not punishable in the US nor in the UK. It is press freedom protections apply. He can't be extradited because we also know that U.S. intelligence agencies have had the security firm that guarded the Ecuadorian embassy in London, the UC Global, secretly behind the back of the Ecuadorian authorities, collaborated with U.S. intelligence agencies and surveilled Assange 24/7 in his refuge in the embassy, and including basically recorded his confidential conversations with medical doctors, with lawyers, and all of this irreparably renders arbitrary that entire proceeding. So, I could go on and on and on. There's simply so many defects in this proceeding. And now we even have, plans revealed of the previous US administration to assassinate or kidnap Assange. Not even talking anymore about extraditing. It really is outrageous to think that all of this should happen in a single case in a democratic country, governed by the rule of law. No judge in his right mind could ever allow such a proceeding to go forward. And so therefore, there is really no point in pursuing this case, and it should be dropped now. Now, that's the legal answer to this. Whether the Biden administration has the political wisdom to see also the opportunity of this moment to have a face-saving exit, that's a different question.
Yes, I have just a few more questions. We're talking to Professor Nils Melzer, the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, and also a professor at University of Glasgow, and he's the chair at the Human Rights at Geneva. I believe that's right. I have no notes in front of me. This is really off the top of our head right now, because this was just, we concocted this interview just like an hour ago. The embarrassment that the CIA underwent when Vault 7 came out. But this right now, this scandal is even more embarrassing, it seems to me. This is a real eyesore, a black eye for the CIA. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But I think it's just about time that the public realizes that this has to be put to an end. We can't have secret intelligence agencies basically operating outside the rule of law. And so what we can see in this process is really that yes, the CIA is being exposed and tries to suppress the truth through illegal methods. The question is, at some point, we really have to draw a line and say, look, there has to be consequences. If we still consider ourselves democracies governed by the rule of law, we just cannot tolerate this type of behavior. Any state may have legitimate interests, but to protect national security interests and other interests, political interests, but they have to pursue those interests within the rule of law. And if we allow impunity for serious crimes like this, then we essentially no longer live in a democracy. We essentially live in a tyranny. And this is, just not something I suppose the public in the US or anywhere else in the world would want to see.
I think a lot of this is going to come out in your book. I mean, it's out right now. I know that it's in several languages, but it's coming out in English February 22nd by Verso. We hope Julian Assange is out by then. Another thing I wanted to ask you, don't you think that, they've relied on this mere characterization assassination of Julian Assange, character assassination of Julian Assange. Do you think, and so the public has become by and large apathetic to his plight. Do you think now that we got the mainstream media out there digging in and exposing what the motivation was to make the character assassination, do you think that will draw more people into the cause and make Julian more of a sympathetic character?
Well, I hope so. I hope so. But I really would encourage people not to think about whether Assange is a sympathetic character or not, because this case is not about Assange. And if you'd ask Julian Assange, he'd tell you exactly that. This is not about him. This is about the other side of the equation. Julian Assange has become a public figure because of what he has done. He has exposed misconduct of very grave, character by states, and not only by the U.S. and its allies, but also by Russia and also by Saudi Arabia and Turkey and all those other countries. Because sometimes Julian Assange is being portrayed as being an enemy of the U.S. or something like that. That's not true. If you look at the publications of this organization, WikiLeaks, you'll see that whenever they receive reliable information of public interest, they will publish that. It doesn't matter whether it's the US or a different country. What matters to them is the public interest of the information. But I'm not here to defend WikiLeaks. Again, I think we should not think in those terms as much, is Assange a good guy or a bad guy? What's important is, does he receive a fair proceeding according to the rule of law? Anybody, whether it's Assange, whether it's you, whether it's me, whether it's the president of the US, anyone can be accused of misconduct and needs to face the law in a proceeding that is governed by the rule of law, that is due process. Does he receive that? And when you look at the Assange case, I mean, they're planning his assassination, they're planning his kidnapping, they accuse him of sexual misconduct, but don't allow him to basically participate in that proceeding, instrumentalize all of those things, launch this defamation campaign to surveil him secretly. They overhear his conversations with lawyers and doctors. But whenever he actually wants to avail himself of the protection of the law, then he's being betrayed by those authorities. We always hear those stories about, yes, Julian Assange should face justice. Well, I agree, but he is not facing justice, he's facing injustice. Had he faced justice, he'd be out and a free man a long time ago.
11 years ago. This should have never happened. This should have never happened. They've taken away 10 years of his life. They've separated him from his partner and his 2 children at a very critical age. The kids don't get to see him. So a lot of people are being punished by this persecution. And that's exactly what it is. It's a persecution. It's not a prosecution, as you have said repeatedly, Nils Melzer. I'm going to give you, if there's any, give us a takeaway. The biggest takeaway from the Yahoo News bombshell story, and then I'm going to ask you to give us your closing thoughts. But the biggest takeaway from the Yahoo News story first.
Look, if your government pursues its interests according to the rule of law, everything's fine. But when your government wants to use assassination and kidnapping and these types of methods to pursue its interests, then it really behaves like a criminal organization. And that's simply not acceptable. I think here we really have to encourage people to face the facts in this case. The facts really are that there is nothing that you can accuse Julian Assange of that is a serious crime. I mean, he has, some of these things may be controversial. Those leaking platforms, I can understand that may be legitimate interests that have to be protected, and so on. But all of this can be discussed in a civilized manner. It can be regulated, and is a consequence, of the fact that the mainstream media, in some aspects, had ignored information that then has been brought to light by an organization like WikiLeaks in the public interest. But the main takeaway here is really what we see is that those governments that are after Julian Assange, the methods that they are considering, that they are employing, disprove any notion of a good faith effort to enforce the law. It is a clear proof and evidence that this proceeding against Julian Assange is illegal. It pursues an illegal purpose of intimidating journalism. It employs illegal means, and therefore it's not sustainable under the rule of law. And this is what I have been saying all along. It's not, the question really is not whether Julian Assange is a perfect person or whether he has made mistakes or not. The question really is, how do the states behave? That's why this case is so important, because it concerns all of us. If our authorities are allowed to kill and kidnap and torture people and invade other countries without a legal basis, without a without being subject to accountability under the rule of law, then we have really crossed the line into a form of government that has no longer anything to do with democracy. And this is really, that's what's so dramatic about this case, that it is a precedent for this type of governance that is incompatible with the rule of law and with democracy. And if any evidence was needed, since yesterday we have it. Finally, definitely, it really puts an end to any of those discussions that perhaps this really is about prosecuting Julian Assange for crimes he has committed. No, he is being prosecuted and persecuted for the crimes that have been committed by others. And we're talking here about the governments, and because they want to protect themselves and provide themselves with impunity.
Wow. Well, I think you answered. You gave us a takeaway, and if you have anything else to add, if you have some kind of closing, I think you just gave it. But if there's anything else, do it now before we go out with this wonderful tune called "I Gave It All" by Neil Meltzer.
Well, I think that it's really every single one of us, in whatever function we are, whether you're in an official function like me working for the United Nations, whether you are a journalist working for a media organization, whether you are an ordinary citizen, this is about your future, about your life, about your right to know what your government is doing with the power and the tax money that you have given to your government. And what the governments are trying to do is to criminalize the truth. And as I always say, once it has become a crime to tell the truth, we all live in a tyranny. And this is really my bottom line. I do not want to leave to my children a world where it has become a crime to tell the truth.
Wow. Well, that's it. That was very well said. Professor Nils Melzer, special rapporteur, UN special rapporteur on torture at the UN. That's part of the title. And he's got a great book coming out. It's already out. You can get it if you speak German. You can get it there. It's sold out immediately. And it's coming out February 22nd, the trial of Julian Assange and basically the persecution of Julian Assange. That will be out February 22nd by Verso. Hopefully, Julian will be out and he'll be able to read it himself. Professor Melzer, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. You've enlightened us, you've enlightened me, and you've enlightened people out there. You are a godsend to this movement, and I wish you luck. And I just want to play you out here. When we interviewed you the other day, we played part of I Gave It All. We're going to play the full 3 minutes of it right now. And looking forward to hearing it. Thank you, Mr. Melzer, Dr. Melzer, Professor Melzer, and continue the great work. You're a tireless fighter for justice. I'm Randy Credico Live on the Fly. We'll see you soon. Here is I Gave It All by Nils Melzer.